A man enters a conference room. His proposal is extraordinary. His vision could fundamentally alter the company's trajectory. But his shoes show wear. His timepiece is inexpensive. His suit jacket fits poorly. And before he utters a single syllable, the verdict is rendered. Not deliberately, not with conscious cruelty, but through that primal assessment every human brain executes in the first 2 seconds of visual contact. They observe him, and they register someone inconsequential. His words encounter resistance. His brilliance evaporates in the space between his posture and his presentation. Nobody articulates the reason. They simply say they will follow up. They never do. That man could be you. That man has been you. And the reason nobody warned you about this mechanism is because the people who understand it would never share it openly. It makes them uncomfortable. It sounds superficial. It feels wrong. But Machiavelli did not care about what felt wrong. He cared about what was demonstrably true. And the truth is this: appearance is the first and most brutal filter the world uses to determine whether you deserve attention or dismissal. The moment you appear poor, they stop listening. Not because they are malicious, because they are human. Now here's what most people misunderstand. They hear that and think it means purchase designer labels, display expensive accessories, fake it until you make it. No, that is the amateur interpretation. That is how people bankrupt themselves trying to appear wealthy. What Machiavelli actually understood was something far more dangerous than fashion trends. He understood that perception is the architecture of power. And the way you present yourself, everything from how you occupy space, to how your environment is structured, to how your words land, determines whether you are treated as someone to be respected or someone to be overlooked. Let me illustrate with something that occurred in Florence in the late 15th century. Cesare Borgia, one of the most ruthless political operators of the Renaissance, was preparing to receive ambassadors from rival city-states. He did not simply polish his armor. He redesigned his entire reception chamber. The lighting was arranged so visitors had to adjust their vision while entering, momentarily disoriented, while he sat in perfect illumination at the far end. His guards wore uniforms more expensive than anything the ambassadors possessed. The food served was intentionally modest, not because Borgia could not afford elaborate feasts, but because restraint in the presence of obvious wealth communicated something words never could. It declared, "I am so powerful, I do not need to impress you." Machiavelli was present in that room. He watched the ambassadors shift uncomfortably in their seats. He watched them agree to terms they arrived prepared to reject, and he documented it afterward, noting that before a single word of negotiation was spoken, the outcome was already determined by the environment Borgia had constructed around himself. Stop. Read that again. The outcome was determined before anyone spoke. That is the principle most people never grasp. You think influence happens during the conversation. It does not. Influence happens before the conversation. It happens in the assessment, and the assessment is visual, physical, spatial. It is ruthlessly superficial, and it is almost always final. Here is a question that should disturb you. Have you ever noticed that when a well-dressed person says something average, people nod and agree? But when a poorly dressed person says something brilliant, people hesitate, question, and dissect it. That is not anecdotal observation. That is documented across decades of social psychology research. In study after study, identical words delivered by someone in a tailored suit versus someone in wrinkled, casual clothing produce wildly different reactions. The suit gets compliance. The wrinkled shirt gets resistance. Same words, same concepts, completely different outcomes. And I will be honest with you, there was a time I thought this was beneath me. I thought substance should speak for itself. I thought people should judge ideas on merit, not packaging. I walked into rooms underdressed because I believed my work should do the talking. And you know what happened? My work did not get the chance to talk. People made up their minds about me before I finished my first sentence. That is a humbling thing to admit. It felt like the world was broken, but the world was not broken. I was simply refusing to play by the rules that actually govern human behavior. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that everyone sees what you appear to be, but few experience what you really are. Most people quote that line and move on. They do not sit with its weight. What he is saying is that reality, your actual competence, your actual value, your actual intelligence, almost never gets evaluated on its own terms. It gets filtered through appearance first, And if the appearance fails the test, reality never gets a hearing. That is the mistake. Thinking substance and surface are separate. They are not. Surface is the gateway. If the gate is locked, your substance rots behind it, unseen, unheard, unused. Let me take you somewhere specific. 2007, a world-class violinist named Joshua Bell, one of the greatest musicians alive, set up in a Washington, D.C. metro station during morning rush hour. He played some of the most technically demanding and emotionally devastating pieces ever composed, on a violin worth $3.5 million. He played for 43 minutes. Over 1,000 people walked past. Almost nobody stopped. He collected approximately $32. 2 nights earlier, he had played a sold-out concert at a Boston theater, where the cheapest seats were $100. Same man, same talent, same instrument. But in the metro station, he looked like any other street performer. And the moment he looked ordinary, they stopped listening. They literally walked past genius because the packaging did not tell them to pay attention. That is not a parable. That happened. And it reveals something so uncomfortable about human nature that most people dismiss it rather than deal with it. Here is the deeper cut. It is not just about clothes. It is not just about watches or shoes or haircuts. Those are the surface layer of something much more structural. What Machiavelli understood, and what the powerful have always understood, is that the way you occupy space communicates your rank before you say a single word. The way you enter a room, the speed at which you move, the volume of your voice, whether you look people in the eye or look away first, whether you adjust yourself to them or force them to adjust to you. All of this is data, and people process it instantly, unconsciously, and almost irreversibly. There was a study conducted at a major hospital where researchers dressed the same man as either a doctor, a businessman, or a janitor, and had him give instructions to staff members. When he wore the white coat, compliance was near total. When he wore the business suit, people listened but occasionally pushed back. When he wore the janitor's uniform, people ignored him outright or challenged him immediately. Same man, same instructions, same voice. The uniform was the only variable, and the uniform decided everything. No, it is not fair. It never was. But fair has nothing to do with how the world actually operates. Fairness is the story told to children so they do not ask inconvenient questions. The adult world, the world where money moves, where deals close, where careers accelerate or die, that world runs on perception, and perception is manufactured. Now let me show you how the powerful manufacture it, because this is where the playbook gets interesting. There is a man I knew, or rather observed from a distance, who built a consulting practice from nothing. He had no credentials that mattered, no prestigious degree, no famous clients at the start. But he understood something that gave him an unfair advantage over every competitor in his space. He understood that his fee was a signal. When he started out, he charged rates that were reasonable, and he got reasonable clients who treated him reasonably, which meant they questioned his advice, delayed payments, and treated him like a vendor. One day he tripled his rate. He did not improve his service. He did not get a new certification. He just charged 3 times more. And everything changed. The clients who came at the higher rate listened more carefully. They implemented faster. They referred him to other high-paying clients. They treated him with deference because the price itself communicated competence. The price was the proof. He told me later, in a rare moment of candor, that it made him a little sick, that the quality of attention and respect was determined not by his actual expertise, but by a number on an invoice. But he did not lower his rate because sickness does not pay the bills. Results do. That is the mechanism Machiavelli described, without having the modern vocabulary for it. When you present yourself as expensive, as rare, as elevated, people assign you those qualities whether you have earned them or not. And when you present yourself as cheap, as accessible, as struggling, people assign those qualities too. You become what you display, and people treat you the way you have trained them to treat you through every visual and behavioral cue you emit. Here is where it gets darker. This is not just about how individuals treat you, it is about how systems treat you. Banks give better loan terms to people who look prosperous. Investors fund founders who look the part. Landlords approve tenants who appear successful. Employers promote employees who present well. The entire infrastructure of opportunity is rigged in favor of those who signal competence through appearance and presence, and rigged against those who do not. It is a self-reinforcing cycle. Look successful, receive opportunity. Receive opportunity, become more successful. Become more successful, look even more so. And the reverse is equally vicious. Look desperate, get dismissed. Get dismissed, become more desperate. Become more desperate, look even worse. That cycle destroys people, and it destroys them quietly, without explanation, without a villain they can point to and blame. Machiavelli would have recognized this immediately. He wrote that men in general judge more by their eyes than by their hands, for everyone can see but few can feel. Everyone sees the external. Almost no one bothers to probe beneath it. And the ones who do probe, the ones who actually evaluate substance, they are so rare that their voice gets drowned out by the majority who judge on surfaces alone. So what do you do with this information? First, you accept it, not as a moral endorsement, but as an operational reality. The way gravity is an operational reality. You do not have to like gravity to respect it. You do not have to like the primacy of appearance to use it. Fighting it does not make you noble. It makes you ineffective. Second, you audit yourself. Not your resume, not your skills, your presentation. How do you look when you walk into a room where your future is being decided? How does your environment look when people encounter your work? What does your digital presence communicate before anyone reads your actual content? These questions matter more than almost anything you will spend your time on this week. Because you can have the best product, the sharpest mind, the most devastating pitch. But if the container looks cheap, the contents get treated as cheap. That is the rule. There are no exceptions. Third, and this is the part most people skip, you must understand that this extends far beyond clothing. Your voice is appearance. A voice that trembles, rushes, or over-explains communicates insecurity. A voice that is measured, unhurried, and selective communicates authority. Your posture is appearance. Slouching, fidgeting, taking up less space than you deserve. These are poverty signals the body broadcasts without your permission. Your timing is appearance, responding instantly to every message, being available at all hours, saying yes to every invitation. These communicate that your time has no value. And if your time has no value, neither do you. The powerful are slow to respond, not because they are playing games, because they genuinely have competing demands. And even when they do not, the rhythm of delay communicates weight, importance, gravity. Let me give you one more picture that burns this in. In 1961, John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev met in Vienna for a summit. Kennedy, by most accounts, was physically weakened by back pain and underprepared. Khrushchev read it instantly, not from intelligence briefings, from the handshake, from how Kennedy sat, from the slight wince when he shifted in his chair. Khrushchev came out of that meeting believing Kennedy was soft, and he acted on that belief. Within months, the Berlin Wall went up, and the Cuban Missile Crisis began. An entire geopolitical cascade triggered, in part because one man's physical presentation in a single meeting communicated weakness. You can debate the history, but the principle is airtight. When you look weak, people act on that weakness. When you look poor, people treat you as disposable. When you look uncertain, people exploit the opening. That is not a theory. That is a pattern that has repeated across every century, in every culture, at every scale of power. Now here is the paradox nobody talks about. The people who need this principle the most are the ones least likely to apply it. When you are struggling financially, the last thing you want to spend money on is appearance. You want to survive. You want to pay rent. You want to eat. And any dollar spent on how you look feels frivolous, vain, wasteful. I understand that. I have been in that position. But that instinct, the instinct to neglect your presentation when you are struggling, is the exact instinct that keeps you struggling. Because every meeting you walk into looking broke, every call you take sounding desperate, every interaction where your environment screams scarcity, you are training the world to exclude you from opportunity. You are actively building the cage you want to escape. Machiavelli wrote that fortune is like a river. When it floods, it destroys everything in its path. But the man who builds levees before the flood survives. Investing in your presentation when you cannot afford to is building the levee. It feels irrational in the moment, but the moment the flood comes, the moment the opportunity shows up, you are the one who is ready. And the one who is ready is the one who gets chosen. That is the mistake. waiting until you can afford to look the part. You cannot afford not to. Every day, you present yourself as someone who does not matter, you deepen the groove. You make it harder for the world to see you differently. You give people permission to overlook you, and they will, gladly, because it is easier, because there are 1,000 other people fighting for the same opportunity. And some of them understood this rule before you did. I want to be clear about something, and this is the messy part I do not enjoy admitting. This entire principle makes me uncomfortable. There is a part of me that hates that the world works this way, that a brilliant mind in a cheap suit gets less respect than a mediocre mind in an expensive one, that packaging can override substance, that first impressions are often final impressions. It feels like a betrayal of everything we are taught about meritocracy and hard work and being judged by the content of your character. But I have watched too many talented people get passed over. I have watched too many average people climb because they understood the optics. And at some point, refusing to acknowledge how the game works is not integrity. It is self-sabotage. So here is where this lands. You have a choice. You can keep believing that the world should evaluate you on your merits alone. And you can keep being frustrated when it does not. Or you can accept Machiavelli's observation for what it is, a diagnosis. Not a prescription for cruelty, but a prescription for survival. The world judges by what it sees. What it sees determines what it hears, and what it hears determines what it gives you. Control what they see, and you control everything downstream. There is an old Florentine saying Machiavelli would have known. The cloth makes the monk, not the prayer, not the devotion, the cloth. Because people encounter the cloth first, and by the time they discover the prayer, their opinion is already formed. You do not need a fortune to apply this. You need intention. You need to treat your appearance, your environment, your voice, your timing, your physical presence, not as afterthoughts, but as strategic instruments. The same way a general treats terrain before battle. You choose the ground that advantages you. You arrange the conditions before the engagement begins. You make the outcome feel inevitable before a single word is exchanged. Stop treating your presentation as vanity. Start treating it as architecture, because every room you enter is a battlefield. And the uniform you wear determines whether they see a commander or a casualty before you ever get the chance to prove which one you actually are. The rich know this. They have always known it. It is why they invest in tailors, in interior designers, in presentation coaches, in personal branding, in every detail that shapes how they are perceived. Not because they are superficial, because they are strategic. They understand that perception is the first domino. Knock it over correctly, and everything else falls in your favor. Knock it over wrong, and nothing you do afterward can fix it. Machiavelli watched princes rise and fall across Italy. And the pattern he noticed was not that the strongest survived. It was not that the smartest prevailed. It was that the ones who controlled how they were perceived, who managed the story the world told about them, who curated their image with the same ruthlessness they brought to warfare. Those were the ones who lasted. The ones who neglected their image, who assumed their deeds would speak for themselves. They were the ones who ended up exiled, imprisoned, or dead. You are not a Renaissance prince, but you are playing the same game. Different era, different stakes, same mechanics. The moment you look poor, they stop listening. Not because they are cruel, because they are wired that way. And once you understand the wiring, you can use it. You can reverse it. You can make it work for you instead of against you. The question is not whether this is fair. The question is whether you are going to keep losing a game you did not know you were playing, or whether you are finally going to learn the rules. Because Machiavelli told you the rules 500 years ago. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. And those who do experience what you really are will never get the chance if what you appear to be pushes them away first. That is the cost of looking poor. It is not just a fashion failure. It is a strategic failure. It is a failure of positioning that echoes through every interaction, every opportunity, every room you will ever walk into for the rest of your life. And the brutal part, the part that should keep you up tonight, is that no one will ever tell you this to your face. They will just stop calling. They will just stop inviting you. They will just stop listening, and you will never know why. You will blame the economy, or luck, or politics, or some vague injustice you cannot name. But the answer was always simpler than that. The answer was always right there, staring back at you from the mirror, from the way you carried yourself, from the story your appearance was telling without your permission. Control the story, control the perception, control the outcome, or do not. But understand that the choice was always yours.